Welcome everyone. Thank you for being here today and this wonderful new live event now that talks about photography. My name is Patricio Manueco and I will be your host today. In today's webinar, we will have a Rafael Goldchain. We'll talk about portrait and beauty retouching with his Wacom Intuos Pro. Welcome, Rafael. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Of course.
It's a real pleasure, chance to uh, chance to talk about my work with the Wacom tablet and some of the techniques that I use on a routine basis in retouching portraits, beauty,
Nice.
and some of the stuff that I teach my students. So yeah, I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, we're looking forward to your class and I guess knowledge you're going to share today. Meanwhile, we're going to wait for this room gets filled and whoever already signed up, please let us know where you're coming from, or if you have Wacom product, just use an emoji, say how's that for you guys. If not, we will wait just for a little bit until we are ready to start. There's some people already saying hi, Rafael. Michael Cooper.
Hello, Mike. How you doing? See, I told you, Patricia, there's going to be people on this talk who are just there to heckle me.
There you go. That's Rafael, Dan from BizTech. So thank you. And obviously, this webinar is sponsored by BizTech, so we will have special promotions there. Just go to their website, and you will learn more about everything about Wacom products and obviously photography products.
I miss saying hi to Dan Dion. It's good to hear from you.
They got Michael Cooper says I have two Wacom products. Wow.
Yeah, Mike is ambidextrous. I think he's retouching with both right and left hand at the same time.
Damn, that's good. What about you, Rafael? How many Wacom products do you have in
Let's
your?
see. I have at the moment I have a Intuos Pro, which is the one I'm going to be using today. I also have a Cintiq 16, which is something that I'm trying to work into my working style. I like the screen, and I like being able to see directly my hand and the pen tip right on the image. So this is something that I'm working into at the moment. And behind me here, there's an Intuos 4 that I've had for a number of years. I still like, but I can't have too many tablets hooked up to the computer, so that one is on reserve.
That's good. Well, there's any preference so far in any of the products you just mentioned, or they're all unique in their way for your, I guess, in your process, work process?
I think they all work really well. I started years ago with a small tablet. I think it was a bamboo, but could have been a different model. I'd say in the mid 90s. And over the years, the tablets have been improving, getting larger, more powerful. The pressure levels are more, there's more pressure levels, so the pen is more sensitive. Just the process has been getting more intuitive, and it's been getting more natural for me. I almost never use a mouse in my work. And if I need to use a touchpad, I just turn the Intuos Pro to its touch options. I turn that on, and so I can use it like a touchpad. Generally, I keep that turned off, but if I'm doing something other than retouching, I turn it on, and then I can use my fingers for all the gestures, scrolling and moving and selecting in other applications.
Oh, that's wonderful, Rafael. Look at all that information you're already sharing with all of us and for this webinar. Well, let's wait for a little bit longer or a little bit more, and then we will start. Just give us maybe 2 more minutes.
Okay.
Meanwhile, if you have anything to say, we got the chat here, so you please place your questions there. We got some housekeeping rules that you will read in a moment. So for this webinar.
I say keep the questions coming as they come. Type them into the chat, and I'll try to answer them on stream. Try to get back where I was before the question. It should be very interactive. I prefer more of an interactive, presentation rather than just me talking the whole time.
Yeah, thank you, Rafael. Well, let's get it started then. In that note, thank you, Rafael. Let's go to the housekeeping rules. So remember, this is a live webinar, but will be recorded, and it will be placed later on our YouTube account, the Wacom that YouTube account, and then you can see it or review it later. And remember, you just mentioned about the question, so that's fine. And then we just opened a new um, Instagram account. Please give us a follow. We got a lot of like information. We would love to hear from you guys. Start building this amazing Canadian community. So please come join us. And it's just Wacom_Canada. Thank you. And our next webinar will be with Brian Egan on October 4th. The same, sponsored by Bistec. So if you want to learn about fashion, portrait, painted faces, this is your guy. And without further ado, Rafael, please take the stage.
Thank you, Patricia. It's always a pleasure to be invited to these seminars by you. I always look forward to them. And I wanted to also say that Brian Egan is a former student, a plug for my teaching, and he's an excellent photographer and retoucher. And one or two of the images that I might use today were loaned to me by him in anticipation of this seminar. So thanks, Brian, if you're watching. Thanks for the loan of these pictures. So I'm going to, because we only have 1 hour, I think I'm going to concentrate on the retouching aspect, the portrait and beauty retouching of this seminar. And then if people have questions about my personal work and how the two things integrate or have integrated in the past, I'll be happy to switch over to my my portfolio, my website, and discuss that part of my work, and of course answer as many questions as come my way. So without further ado, I think what I'll do is I'll share the screen. And I hope that everybody can see that. So
I can see it.
yeah, so I have a relatively beautifully shot image of a young woman here. And I'm going to be going through steps in what I would do, retouching, to make her look as best as she can. And I also have another image of another young portrait subject here, where more extensive retouching is required. This image came from some sort of image bank at some point. And a really tough subject would be this one, where you know, what we have is a very masculine but you know, rough skin quality. And I'll talk about what can be done and what the expectations can be when working on a job like this. I'll start with this though. So I have actually done pretty much all the steps that I plan to demonstrate, and so this is the final result. And as you can see, many of the skin blemishes have been removed. The skin has been smooth. Highlights are nice and broad and pleasing and dimension, to give dimension to the face. I cropped the image a little bit, so to remove the tips of the fingers here and achieve a certain proportion and frame the image a little better. And so I'll start with this image and go through a few steps, and then I'll shift over to the other one. So I'm going to turn off all these layers. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn them all and turn off the whole set, and then start afresh. So you can see here, I'm going to zoom in here. You can see there's a bunch of small blemishes up here. There's also you know, highlights that might be better to tone down. Skin gloss over here, all of that I would like to do as well. And there's a little bit of skin irregularities here that I'd like to work on. What you also see here is makeup, right? So having had a lot of makeup on me, I know I can recognize it right away when makeup powder is applied. So there's, you know, what are the expectations here? The expectations is not to make her look or meet some kind of perfection, but to actually attract the eye to the attractive features of the sitter's face, of the model, and try to move the eye away from anything that might not be as attractive. So you want to, in a way, distract the viewer towards the beautiful features So that's what I'm going to try to do. The first thing that I always do is I duplicate the background layer, and this is called my safety layer. Just in case I screw up, I have a background layer that can help me. And then I'm going to create two layers here that will help me continue working. One of them is a standard layer. So I'm going to create a standard layer. I'm going to call that layer, what am I going to call it? Blemishes. Blemishes, and that layer will be in normal mode, opacity 100%. I can give it a color, say something like a flesh tone, and that will be there. Now, I can also create a layer here that will help me see the blemishes a little more clearly, and it's just for viewing purposes. So I'm going to use a adjustment layer, and it'll be black and white. There. And for that layer, I'm going to turn right there. I'm going to call that blemish visualize. As you can see, I'm a real layer namer. I don't believe in layer one, copy of layer one, copy of layer one. That can be too labor intensive to figure out which layer is doing what. So I'm going to turn the red component of this black and white down, and now you can see more the texture of the skin. It helps you visualize more what areas need to work on. To offset some of the darkness there, you can turn up the yellow a little bit, turn up the green or the blue. But generally, this is the look that you achieve. If I try to put this layer in luminosity mode, I get my skin values back, but I still have the increased visibility of the layer that it allows me to see all these blemishes. So now I'm going to go back to the blemishes layer, and generally I'll use one of the healing tools here. So I'll start with the healing brush tool, which works by sampling good quality skin or good smooth skin and painting over the blemishes. To change the brush size, I can use the touch circle on the tablet. So I can choose brush size, and I can increase the size of my brush or reduce the size of my brush, or I can hold Control and Option or Alt on the PC at the same time, and that allows me to see also the quality of the brush, whether it's hard as I drag down or soft as I drag up, drag to the side to make it larger, drag to the side, to the left, to the right to make it larger, to the left to make it smaller. So I'm going to work with a brush. You want to try to work with a brush that is just larger than the lesion. You don't want to work with big brushes because that's going to really change the texture of the skin. You want to minimize alterations to the sitter's own skin texture. And that's one of the things that's really crucial in retouching. So Option click here to sample, and then paint over here. And I should look at my settings. Okay, so why didn't that work? Well, it didn't work because I need to pull information from the layer below. So I need to change the way the tool works to current and below. Right? So that should work now. There we are. So I went too far. So I'm going to try it again. This time that's better. And I don't work in one spot too long because the eye gets used to the look of that spot, and you lose your perspective. So I tend to move around a lot so that I'm looking at any given area in the image fresh. So gradually, and you turn off the layer from time to time to see how far you've come. That gives you a little perspective of how much of the skin you have gone over. And over here, I'm going to use a very, very small brush because I don't really want to get rid of these flyaway hairs. So I want to get in there delicately and try not to disturb the hair. Same thing here. And a little bigger here. Afterwards, when I use frequency-based retouching, I will some of these areas will also get smoother, especially the gloss. The glossy areas will look a whole lot better. So as you can see, this is starting to work pretty well, and I'm working as fast as I usually do. With a small brush, then you retain as much original texture as possible. I'm working with a brush that's about 25 pixels wide, and changing it as I go. I'm not going to do every single blemish, but do enough to make a difference. Over here, I think what I'll do is just use a little bit of, like, as little pressure on the brush as possible, and try to use the pressure sensitivity to get at this little area to improve it. And over
So,
here,
Rafael, we have a question on the chat. It's from Michael Cooper. They said, do you change the mode to Lightning or Darken?
yeah, I do. Sometimes when I see, that there would be an advantage in doing that. So if I'm, for example, if I'm trying to retouch or improve the look of something like this over here, right, or reduce like this over here, the wrinkle, the darker pixels are at the bottom of the blemish. So by changing the mode for the tool to lighten, then I'm only going over the pixels that are the darkest. So I sample out here, right, and that would increase the smoothness of the retouch, a little more invisible. Now I don't really want to go over that because I think I would leave that. So I'm going to flip over my pen and use the eraser to get rid of that bit of retouching. But over here, I think I would use a small brush and try to go over the darker parts. And again, be judicious as to how much you retouch, because there is a point beyond which things don't look natural. And, if I go to darken, then I can go over areas like these glossy areas and use skin that is darker as a sample from the area that I want to retouch, and that targets the lighter areas without touching any darker pixels. So it's a good mode. Thank you, Michael, for suggesting it. Right there. A lot of these glossy spots will be improved in the frequency retouch. And I'm going to go back to normal mode here. How am I doing? Okay, so it's good to go back to your fit to screen and turn the retouching layer on and off just to see what stands to the eye, what calls you that may need to be fixed. And so I'm going to go back in here and go over this little area. And over here as well. Just improve the appearance of these things. They don't need to be removed 100%. Okay, back door. Okay, I'm going to go to this. Things that stand out are worth going back to. Sometimes models have moles, and they're part of part of who they are, you don't necessarily want to remove them. So I'm going to leave that one there, but I'm going to get rid of this here. It's good to follow the highlight dark and shadow pattern as you sample, so you end up sampling pixels that are similar to the area where you want to retouch. Much as you would use the clone tool, the results will be a little smoother. And I think I just went over the hair here, so I'm going to leave that alone for now. And over here, and I am leaving these creases underneath the eyes because they are part of you know, the human face, and if you remove them altogether and you work really hard at removing that, it is going to look artificial, and you really don't want that unless you're going for a very fantasy look, which is generally not something that I do. You'll hear my friend Brian Egan talking about helping people out when he retouch, just helping them look as best as they can. You're not out to create you know, an ideal look for them. You're after improving their looks the way they are. Okay, as you can see, I can get into the zen of retouching and lose sight of time and anything that's happening around me. It's a very kind of meditative activity, or if you prefer, obsessive activity, which appeals to obsessive people like me. Okay, let's try that. And slight small discolorations of the skin. Sorry about that ping. Let's zoom out and see how things are looking. I'm going to turn this off, and so that's looking pretty good. Turn that back on. I think I'll leave it like this for now. So now I'm going to turn off that visualization layer and leave it that way, and I'm going to move on to do a finishing touch on the skin texture and the modeling of the skin. So I'm going to use a technique called frequency-based retouching. It's not something too difficult to do, and it involves two layers. It's called frequency-based because it separates the high frequencies from the low frequencies. Low frequency is essentially tone and color, and high frequency is detail. So the beauty of this technique is that it separates what is color and tone in one layer and all of the tiny little details on the other layer, so you can retouch them separately. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to merge all of the layers and create a new layer up top that has everything that we've done so far. So I'm going to select this layer here even though it's turned off, and I'm going to go Command Option Shift E, or you can hold the Option key or the Alt on the PC and go to your layer menu and choose Merge Visible, and I guess I have to select this layer, otherwise it ain't going to work. Layer Merge Visible. So I'm going to go Command Option Shift E, and this is our first layer. I'm going to drag it above my visualization layer so that I'm going to be getting rid of this layer. I just want to leave it there for people to realize that's what I used to do this retouching first. So this layer I'm going to duplicate. There we go. So this layer here, the bottom layer, the bottom merge layer, I'm going to call that low frequency. So LOW, and just for fancy F, option F gives you that fancy F. And the top layer here, I'm going to call that high F, high frequency. Okay, and you can also put them in a group, which is even fancier. So I'm going to go group from layers, and I'm going to call that frequency seps, those separations. And I can maybe color that group red like that. So I'm going to open the group, and I'm going to turn off the high sep layer, high separation layer, high frequency layer, and target the low frequency layer. And I'm going to zoom in to 100% to see detail, and I'm going to blur this layer. So I'm going to use filter, blur, Gaussian blur. And the purpose here is to eliminate all the detail. You want to smooth it out. So you drag this up as much as you need to see all the detail, skin detail and so on disappearing. In my experience with a high resolution image, somewhere around 20 to 25 is about the right spot. So I'm going to leave it there. So this is what that looks like. So this is basically color and tone and no detail. Now I'm going to subtract this layer, subtract all the color and tone from the high frequency layer. I'm going to turn that back on, leaving only the detail behind. And you'll see how I'm going to do that. So basically I'm subtracting all the color and tone from the detail layer, this one here. So I'm going to go to the image menu and choose a command seldom used called applied image. And I'm going to target the layer that I'm going to subtract. And so I'm going to go to the low layer here, and that should be probably this one here. And I'm going to use the subtract command here, like that. And the two parameters here, scale. Scale means that the majority of the tone remaining is in the middle gray. That's 128. And sorry, 128 means that the majority of what remains on the layer is in the middle gray area. And the scale 2 is, you can see we're getting a little bit of a halo around things. The scale is the thinness or the thickness of that halo. So I'm going to click OK now. And that's what that layer looks like. And if we blend that layer in linear light mode, we now have our image back. So if I turn off that group, there's no difference in the image before this structure was created and after. And now we can start making making changes. People use this technique for all kinds of ways, for all kinds of purposes. So what I'm going to do here is by no means the only way to do things, but I'll just use some simple things that we can do. For example, the highlights. If I turn off my high frequency layer and target my low frequency and use the lasso tool, L is the shortcut, and maybe put in a feather of about 20 pixels, so nice and wide feather, I can go after some of these highlights. So I can select, oops, sorry, pressure on my pen a little more, and select this area, and then apply a little bit of blur to it to make it a little smoother. So filter, blur, Gaussian blur, and starting at the bottom, you can start increasing before and after. I'm going to zoom in. And you can see beyond a certain point, it spreads too far. So you kind of have to gauge it so you still have a highlight there, but it's not as bright as it was. So I think I'm going to pull it back a little bit more, like that. And deselect. And I'm going to go to this area here. Maybe I'm going to add. And I'm going to do the same thing. This time I'm going to run the blur. I'm going to run the blur the way it is from the top of the filter. Just run Gaussian blur. There's a couple of other areas that I wanna go after over here. I'm going to remove this area and run the filter again. And that's too far. So for that highlight, which is already toned down, I'm going to go back to the filter and try to gauge a better amount, better radius. Let's go there. And then the same thing here. Add a bit there and run the filter. Right about there. Deselect and let's check what it looks like. So those highlights have been toned down. See? You can see it on the nose. And I can also go into this area a little bit and tone that down. I'm going to stay away from the lips. I may have to go back to them with a retouch tool, with a healing tool to smooth out. So Gaussian blur and Gaussian blur. And this part over here is a little touchy. I'm going to give it a try and see if I can get that highlight not to glow so hot. Okay, the rest of those details are actually in the high frequency layer. So, where are we with this? Let's turn it on and off. So I think that's looking pretty good. The next thing I would do is I would go to the high frequency layer. And I can do this on a separate layer or right on the high frequency layer. I'm going to use the rubber stamp tool with a large brush and very low opacity, say 10%. And I'm going to brush away in the highlights a little bit from smooth skin onto the highlights to just tone them down a little bit. So I'm going to go from here and with very little pressure on my pen, just brush away those highlights. Let's see. Yeah, smaller brush. Okay, and I'm going to go here as well with a smaller brush and try to tone down these highlights a little bit. Don't take them out completely, like this one here. And I'm just cloning a little bit of skin and applying it at a very, very low opacity. And I guess I'm going to do it here as well.
It's looking wonderful, Rafael. So
it's looking a little better, I think. You know, it's an iterative process. You kind of work away at it. until eventually, gradually, it starts, coming together.
Yeah, it looks exquisite right now, and it's not even done. Like all the details and how it's transforming that beautiful image into something more
Yeah.
outstanding.
Where we can go from here is we can also do a little bit of dodging and burning of the low frequency layer. And for example, bring out some of the highlights, but softly, and darken some of the areas that could give the face a little more shape. So for that purpose, I would create a new layer and call it, say, tone, or dodge and burn if you want, DB, and this layer would need to be in a special mode and in more, blending mode. I would use overlay or soft light. And when you do that, you need to fill that layer with overlay neutral color, 50% gray. And that allows you to dodge and burn without actually damaging the image layers. This is simply like a filter. So I'm going to click OK here. And you can see I've turned the detail layer, so you can see that I'm going to be dodging and burning here the low frequency layer. And the way I'm going to do that is I can use the dodging and burning tools, or I can simply use a brush. Either way, whatever your style is. So to dodge or lighten, I'm going to use the dodging tool, and I'm going to use a large brush and a very low exposure, because you really want to build this up. You don't want to do it all at once. So I'm going to put a little bit of a large highlight here at the top of the cheekbone, and turn it off and on so you can see, am I doing the right one? No, I'm not. I'm going to go to my history and turn the dodging tool back to here. Okay, so no dodging. Make sure I choose the dodging and burning layer here. And see, it's starting to happen here, and create a bit of a highlight on the chin. And let's see, you can see very, very slight, subtle brush strokes on that layer above the eyebrows. It's always nice here, and the bridge of the nose. If you want a little more of a sharp highlight, then you can do that. So let's see what this is looking like. Okay, and now burn. So I'd use the burn tool, again with a very soft brush at a very low opacity. In this case is 5%. The burning seems to be a stronger tool than the dodging tool, so it can easily start looking too dark. So I'm going to go in here and darken this area, and a little bit under the eyebrows. And is this, yes, it's marking, yeah. Like that, a little bit under the nose if you want a little bit of a darker shadow for this beauty lighting pattern. And up here, in case the model has a bit of a double chin, a little bit of volume down there, this can help to hide it. And if the model has a little bit of darkness under the eyes, this is one way that you can, improve it. So before and after.
Hey guys, please remember, if you got questions or any inquiries regarding what the process for Rafael is showing right now, please just drop a line in the chat box and we will read and maybe Owen respond that to Rafael.
So, but to finish this image, I'm going to go back to my original layers here so I can show you, because I'm going to jump onto another image to show you something different. So this is what I've been doing here. I'll turn all of this off. And in my sample layers, I also had blemish removal. I had that visualization layer. and I had frequency separation here with the detail layer turned on. Then I did some more blemish removal here. Let me turn all these layers off. So I did a little more blemish removal over here and the separation. I don't know how I ended up with two of them, but never mind. I did a bit of desaturation of the skin. I added a little bit of contrast, and I set the black and white points to presumably print this image so that the whites wouldn't blow out and the shadows would have, you know, rich detail. And then I did a little bit of additional dodging and burning. You can see that quite clearly now. I don't know whether it's coming across Zoom, but it should. And crop. Right. Any questions about any of this so far?
I don't read any questions so far on the chat, my dear Rafael, but I mean,
Okay.
please just keep going. It's just all wonderful process. I can see the difference and the Dutch and burn and all these tools that you're showing. I think those are very
There's so much
powerful.
more. Thanks,
Yeah.
Patricia. There's so much more that can be done, but I'm going to move to this image here.
Yeah.
And there's so much that this image needs doing. I'm just going to do this here. You know, the inventory is large. I'd like to get rid of this hair here. I'd like to tone down this frizzy bit of the hair here. And over here, of course, there's a lot of, you know, blemish removal and skin texture. And I'd also like to do something for the eyes. Using the Wacom tablet and a brush, you can actually add eyelashes, because her eyelashes are a little bit short, so you can actually give her, you know, longer eyelashes, and tone the color of the shoulder as well. It's very tanned and integrated better with the skin tone on her face. So all of that are things that we can do. I'm going to turn on layer by layer here.
That was one of my questions, Rafael. Currently, you're using Intuos Pro, you said, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you find that quite beneficial for your process, I guess, work process, right?
Yeah, oh yeah. You know, you can be subtle with the pressure on the pen. So you can, you know, it's easy to overdo things, and the mouse is on and off. Whereas here you have infinite pressure steps in between on and off. So you can apply as much of the effect or as little as you wish. It can be much more subtly blended into the existing texture of the image. And you know, I can work with a pen, with a Wacom pen for hours without feeling any effect on my hand or on my wrist. It's like it's good for my anatomy. It's like I don't get tired. It's like painting or writing with a pen.
And how long you been working with Wacom, Rafael? Like for how many years? I'm assuming.
Since the mid-90s.
Oh wow!
So, I'll show you something here. I'm going to stop sharing the screen for a minute, and I'll show a different screen.
That's at least like 22 years or more.
So if I go here. Some of you may know this work, but these are all portrait images in which there is only one sitter, one model, and that is me. And so these were all retouched with a much older Wacom tablet in Photoshop. And they were shot on film, 4x5 film, and then they were scanned on a drum scanner, and roughly 100 megabyte file. And then they were retouched using a Wacom tablet in Photoshop. So this project is where I cut some of my you know, my chops. I got my chops in retouching. This is from the late 90s and early 2000s. So smooth skin in some, and a little more textural skin in some. This is where the texture was exaggerated using makeup and retouching. So there was a lot of makeup use here and lighting, and you know.
How long it takes you just to create one of those photographies that you're sharing after? I mean,
anywhere
taking the photo?
Anywhere from a few hours to 2 days. Sometimes I do 2 days and I get tired of it. I can't look at it anymore. So I go and do something else, and then a day later I go back to it, and I have a kind of a clear view, a little more perspective of how I'd like it to look. And so I take it up again. And sometimes I've gone back to images years later, and I've said, oh, that wasn't well done. I'm going to do it again, especially if I have better Wacom tablet. I know I can do it better. So, things like this was a wig, right? This is a hairpiece that was made for this picture by a very talented person named Kelly McCallum, who's the director of the Complexions International School. At the time, he was working for the opera company, and he was very generous in working with me and creating this hairpiece and then putting it on. It only looks good from this angle. If I was to turn, it wouldn't look right at all. And so going in and retouching so that the wig would be better integrated with my skin and look a little more believable without going for perfection. I needed my viewer to know that this is a staging, is not the real thing. And so all of these, the smooth skin was all done in Photoshop, hours of work, and then the color of the eyes, mixing the channels in Photoshop to change my eye color from a light blue to a darker tone. All of those things were fun and a lot of work, but really meaningful. So this is Patricia, where I cut my chops. Retouching. For example, a lot of the shape in this face, this is late in the project, and I would really wanted to be more vigorous in my retouching, probably overdoing it. So a lot of this is dodging and burning.
Wow. I love that project of you. Like, if you tell more about the story, because it's very fascinating. I had the fortune to hear it last week about how you create all the photos, and there's a meaning behind, so it's just wonderful.
Yeah, thank you. If there's questions at the end, I'd be happy to talk about it more. So I just wanted to show you what I used in my artistic process, what I used for my retouching process, and gave the retouching kind of artistic meaning. It wasn't simply retouching portraits and delivering to clients. There was a higher kind of objective in it, which made it all that more worthwhile for me, and it turned into a book in 2008. So what do I have here in this? First of all, I have a couple of layers called Lightening and Darken layers, and I wanted to show you a little bit of what these can do. This is the most subtle form of retouching you can get, where you can actually retain the texture of retain the texture of the original skin and simply alter its tonalities. So I'm going to turn this on and off. And there we go. So you can see all the blemishes are reduced in their appearance, Patricia? After? Before?
Yeah, I can see them.
Essentially, these are curve layers, and one of them lightens and the other one darkens. So I'll set it up. I'm going to turn this one off just for people to see. So there's my background copy, and I'm going to create a curves layer. There's the curves layer, and I'm going to say this layer will lighten. And I'm going to copy that layer, Command J, and I'm going to call that layer darken. By convention, it doesn't matter where they are. I prefer the darken layer below the lighten layer. Maybe it's logical. So for the lighten layer, I will lighten. I will raise my curve, and with experience, you kind of get to see how much you need to do that. And then I'm going to go to the darken layer and darken. Sure, usually about the same in the opposite direction. And then I'll inverse the masks. So I'm hiding the effect of these layers. And to do that, I'll select the mask and hit Command I for invert, like that. And go here and invert. So essentially, there's nothing happening here. If I turn these two layers on and off, you won't see any difference. So now I can paint in the masks with a brush. And usually you use a very tiny brush. A very low opacity, so 10% is good enough, and a very soft edge. And I start with the lighten layer, and I'm going to zoom in here. And basically I go at the part that needs to be lightened in the blemish. like that. And then I go to the darken layer and I paint in the dark part, right? So you can see a blemish is essentially, you know, lighter skin and darker skin in close proximity. So and the lighten, I think I did too much there, so I'm going to reduce it a bit. Eventually, you end up with exactly what you need. So, and then you put those in a group, and this is very painstaking work because you need to go basically across, you know, and making sure that you're not going about it too much and using as small a brush as you possibly can. To show you the mask, that's what the mask looks like. Tiny little strokes that essentially change the tonality of the skin, and you're not replacing skin, you're not cloning skin, you're not healing skin, you're simply shading. And eventually you end up doing enough that it hides the blemish, or it gives it a much better appearance. Is that making sense, Patricio?
Of course,
Yeah.
Rafael, it looks great. I mean,
So
we still have time. You can just show us more of the process. It's just wonderful.
yeah. So these are done here. And then I needed to also work on the shadows here. So I smoothed them out. How did I do that? I'm going to turn that layer off, and I'm going to merge all the layers up to the top of the lighten and darken layers. Command Option Shift E, like that. And what I did is I used the patch tool. So I'll go to the patch tool here, and usually in normal mode, and you use it in the same layer, and select that little bit of shadow. It's the shadow from the tie-up of the top the model's wearing, and then drag to an area of you know, unshadowed skin like that. And it doesn't take it away completely, but it goes smooth, right? Which is what I was looking for. And then select that and go to an area that has smoother skin. And the overall effect is reducing the shape of the shadow, so it's not so much of an object, and it becomes more simply shading. Shading that's caused by the light going past the shoulder and creating a shadow. And so just reducing the straight lines in the shadow, just the definitive lines, and smoothing them out like that. Okay, so that's what that layer is about. And actually I could work on it some more to smooth out these areas here and take away some of the blotchiness. Okay, then I did frequency separations. So that's the low and that's the high. And I used a little bit of dodging and burning here to lighten under the eyes. That's the high separation, the high detailed layer. And here I used some cloning at a very low opacity to tone down some of the highlights and create an overall smoother skin appearance while retaining naturality. So that's that. And I put all of that within a group called Skin Prep. So that is a Skin Prep. Now, to tidy up the hair, I do have a layer there, and this is very simple. I'm going to simply merge the layers again up here, and I'm going to call it hair tidy, just like the other one. 2. And this lock of hair is pretty easy to do if you know your paths. I have a path created already called cheek, and I did that with a curvature path. But in this, I'll draw one very quickly with a regular pen tool, just clicking and dragging across the area. I'm going to start about here, and I'm basically tracing the cheek of the model across the area that where I'd like to remove that lock of hair. Just like that. And then I can end there, and I can just return back to my original point without too much need for control there. And now I'm going to hold down the Command key and click away from the path to turn off all the points, and then click on the path to turn on the points, but just make them visible. So I can zoom in and, edit the points to make sure that they are exactly where I want them. This is a really important skill going forward. I'm sure the people in the audience who've done a lot of retouching or professional, this is an obvious thing. Paths are a huge benefit. I'm going to add a point here. There, because they give you so much control over the area that you want to retouch. So I'm going to zoom back out. And then this is the pen path that I just created. It's called work path by default. I can double click it and I can call it cheek path, like that. And then I think it's going to give me the opposite of these, because I had one of these options turned off. So we'll get over that, no problem. So basically what I'm going to end up happening here is I'm going to end up selecting the whole image minus that area. So I'm going to reverse the selection. Anyway, so to turn that path into a selection, I will option click on the turn path into selection, or create selection from path button at the base of the paths panel. Option click, and that brings up options. I'm going to give it a feather radius of 2 and create a new selection here. And I'm going to invert the selection. You can see if your selection is the right one by simply grabbing a brush and selecting a color and painting. And if it paints inside the selection, then the selection is the right one. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to select, and this is one of the virtues of a plain backdrop when you shoot a portrait, that you can just select the color of the backdrop in that area. And use your brush at, say, 100% opacity with a very soft tip. Very, very soft. And paint away the lock of hair. I acknowledge the fact that with more background with more varied color, this would be a little harder to do, but not impossible. So there we are. Now this area here, if I wanted to thin it out a little bit, I could select my lasso with say a 5 pixel feather and drag a little selection right to the middle here and out to the back. I'll do it again. Take my time now, don't rush, and then go back this way. And then I have my hair tidy layer selected. I'm going to copy that area to a separate layer, Command J. So it's a temporary layer. And then using my Command key, I'll use my right nudge key on the keyboard to move that selected area a little further in, just to thin it out, like that. And then I'll merge it back down, Command E. Select, Command E. There we are. And then using a paintbrush, same with the same background color over here, selecting it. And a big paintbrush, I'm going to use the edge of the paintbrush to just lighten up the frizzy. And I ended up lightening up here. So I'm going to go to my history and go back a couple of steps. And on this side, I will do the same. Select the background in case, sample the background in case it's a slightly different color, and take away some of the frizzies. So that's what the hair tidy layer is all about. And what I wanted to show you next, if I have time, Patricio.
Well, I mean, you can show that last time. I mean, we're already over the hour, but you please go ahead. I mean.
I wanted to show the eyes, unless there's other other things that people are interested in, for example, the shoulder color, or shaping the nose and the ears, and a little bit of dodging and burning, and skin finish. So
Wow, you really
that's
transformed that
from
image.
before to after. And by the way, I used a brush that I downloaded from somewhere for the eyelashes. You just need to transform the angle and the size of the brush, and it worked. And sample the color of the original eyelashes, and just stamp it, and then retouch a little bit around it on a separate layer.
Wow, well, thank you, Rafael. It's just outstanding seeing your devotion or for this work that you do for life, for living. It's really having an honor having you this webinar.
Pleasure's
Please,
mine.
can you share a way so people interested here can follow up with you, and maybe in the things on the techniques you're sharing? It will be wonderful.
Yeah, my website is basically www.myfirstnameandlastname.com, rafaelgoldchain.com, and then there is a contact page there that you can just write to me. As soon as I get an email from anybody, I respond right away.
Well, that's wonderful, Rafael. Well, do you want to share your last 3 takeaways or ideas or something from this webinar? That would be wonderful before we close, and thank everyone.
Yeah, let's see. Retouching the human face is, you know, a very meaningful and pleasurable process. I think, you know, take your time. I take my time with it, so you have repeated moments at which you look at it, so that you're not making all your decisions based on one extended session, and even look at it the day after. Try to preserve the original features of your sitter as much as possible, so that when people look at their own picture, they recognize themselves, but they see an improved version, and they'll be grateful for that. You know, using the Wacom tablet is the way to go. I can't possibly conceive of retouching, doing this kind of retouching with a mouse. Even a high quality mouse it's not the same thing. Yeah, and
Well,
I'm going to try the Cintiq now.
That's wonderful, Rafael. Well, thank you so much. I'm just gonna aside Michael Cooper. He said Rafa is a true educator and a star in Canadian photography, which is true. That's why you're showing all this information with us. And John McKinney, thank you. It was very informative. So thank you so much, guys, for your questions, for your time. Thank you, mainly Rafael, for all the work. I love doing this partner or teaming with you, and
My
keep
pleasure.
learning. Yeah.
I've been a client at Vistec for many years, so it's a pleasure to do it with Wacom and Vistec together.
Yeah, and then remember, just to close this webinar, we'll have our Brian Egan next webinar in October. Please come register. We will drop the line at the Wacom webinar. And then if you want to revisit this webinar, it's always on YouTube, Wacom channel. So with that said, thank you so much, Rafael. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Pato.
That's it.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thank you.